Happy Bloomsday! I'm Elizabeth Fuller, the librarian at the Rosenbach, here to tell you a bit about what makes our Bloomsday unique, which is the presence of the manuscript of Ulysses. Joyce had already been working on Ulysses for 4 years when it began to be published in installments in the New York magazine The Little Review in March 1918, and he was only halfway through writing it. By the middle of 1920, he was in serious financial trouble, but fortunately the Little Review's financial backer, John Quinn, an Irish-American lawyer who was a collector and patron of writers and artists, offered to buy the manuscript from him as a way of subsidizing the work. Several months later, the magazine had to stop publishing after the content of some episodes got the publishers arrested for sending obscene material through the mail. After this, Joyce had no hope of finding another publisher in the English-speaking world, but Sylvia Beach, an American expatriate who ran the Shakespeare and Company bookshop in Paris, where he was then living, agreed to take on the project, and the first complete edition was published in 1922. The next year, Quinn began selling his library at a series of auctions. Our co-founder, Dr. A.S.W. Rosenbach, was by then acknowledged as the world's leading rare book dealer, and as a scholar of literature, he knew that this was one of the world's great books. Others at the sale weren't as perceptive, and he was able to buy it in 1924 for just $1,975, less than the reserve price. He brought it home to Philadelphia, and it's been here ever since. Since we can't invite you into the building to see the manuscript, as we usually do on Bloomsday, let's have a brief digital look. It can be tricky to explain briefly just what this manuscript is and how it relates to the published book. It contains a complete version of every episode, but the text is substantially different from the final version, and every episode has a different textual history. The early ones were first published in magazine form, and he took time to revise them again for the book. The last episodes were written as he was getting close to his self-imposed deadline and didn't go through as many drafts. Joyce's typical working method was to make a first draft in a notebook and revise it heavily. When he was satisfied for the time being, he made a clean copy on loose sheets of paper and sent it to a typist. He then made further changes by hand to the typed copy and sent it to the printer. After the printer set it in type, they'd send him proofs, which authors are just supposed to review to catch errors, but Joyce continued to revise and to add new material. About a third of the whole text was added at the proof stage. The result is that some of the best-known features of the book aren't present in the manuscript. Here's part of Aeolus in the first edition, with the headlines that set off each brief section of the text. Here's the same passage in the manuscript, which doesn't yet have them. He still hadn't thought of them when the Little Review was published. It wasn't until he got the proofs back that he began adding them, as well as more text. In most of the early episodes, the manuscript is close to what's known as fair copy, a version that's written out clean without changes, even when, as we've seen, he made extensive changes later on in other places. But with the last 2 episodes in particular, he just ran out of time. A nightmare for the typists, but a great treasure for us because we can see much more of his thought process. The manuscripts of Ithaca and Penelope are still in the notebook stage. He never got as far as copying them out onto separate sheets. In addition to the changes within the basic text, which he wrote on the right-hand page, he began adding more text in its left margin, and then when he ran out of room there, another layer on the left-hand page. And as usual, he added still more on the proofs. If he hadn't decided the book had to be published by his 40th birthday, I think he'd still be writing it. Speaking of running out of time, it's time to get back to the readings. We look forward to seeing you in person when we reopen. In the meantime, if you have a question about the manuscript, or anything else in the collections, you can find more information or ask us a question on the research section of the website. Now on with the show.
Hello, I'm Kevin Quinn, and I'll be reading 2 passages from episode 10, Wandering Rocks. Mr. Bloom turned over idly pages of the awful disclosure of Maria Monk, then of Aristotle's masterpiece. Crooked, botched print, plates, Infants cuddled in a ball in blood-red wombs like livers of slaughtered cows. Lots of them like that at this moment, all over the world, all buttoned with their skulls to get out of it. Child born every minute somewhere. Mrs. Purefoy. He laid both books aside and glanced at the third, Tales of the Ghetto, by Leopold von Schacker-Massich. That I had, he said, pushing it by. The shopman let 2 volumes fall on the counter. Them are 2 good ones, he said. Onions of his breath came across the counter out of his ruined mouth. He bent to make a bundle of the other books, hugged them against his unbuttoned waistcoat, and bore them off behind the dingy curtain. On O'Connell Bridge, many persons observed the grave deportment and gay apparel of Mr. Dennis J. McGeaney, professor of dancing, etc. Mr. Bloom alone looked at the titles. Fair Tyrants by James Love Birch. Know the kind that is. Had it? Yes. He opened it. Thought so. A woman's voice behind the dingy curtain. Listen, the man. No, she wouldn't like that much. Got her at once. He read the other title. Sweets of Sin. More in her line. Let us see. He read where his finger opened. All the dollar bills her husband gave her were spent in the stores on wondrous gowns and costliest frillies for him, for Raoul. Yes, this here, try. Her mouth glued on his in a luscious, voluptuous kiss, while his hands felt for the opulent curves inside her deshabillé. Yes, take this. The end. You are late, he spoke hoarsely, eyeing her with a suspicious glare. The beautiful woman threw off her sable-trimmed wrap, displaying her queenly shoulders and heaving embonpoint. An imperceptible smile played round her perfect lips as she turned to him calmly. Mr. Bloom read again. The beautiful woman. Warmth showered gently over him, cowing his flesh. Flesh yielded amply amid rumpled clothes, whites of eyes swooning up. His nostrils arched themselves for prey, melting breast ointments for him, for Raoul. Armpits oniony sweat, fish gluey slime, her heaving embonpoint. Feel, press, crushed sulphur dung of lions. Young, young. An elderly female, no more young, left the building of the Courts of Chancery, King's Bench, Exchequer, and Common Pleas, having heard in the Lord Chancellor's Court the case in lunacy of Potterton, in the Admiralty Division the summons ex parte motion of the owners of the Lady Carnes versus the owners of the bark Mona in the Court of Appeal reservation of judgment in the case of Harvey versus the Ocean Accident and Guarantee Corporation. Phlegmy coughs shook the air of the bookshop, bulging out the dingy curtains. The shopman's uncombed gray head came out, and his unshaven, reddened face, coughing. He raked his throat rudely, puked phlegm on the floor. He put his boot on what he had spat, wiping his sole along it, and bent, showing a raw-skinned crown, scantily haired. Mr. Bloom beheld it. I'll take this one. The shopman lifted eyes, bleared with old rheum. Sweets of Sin, he said, tapping on it. That's a good one. Stephen Dedalus watched through the webbed window the lapidary's fingers prove a time-dulled chain. Dust webbed the window and the show trays. Dust darkened the toiling fingers with their vulture nails. Dust slept on dull coils of bronze and silver, lozenges of cinnabar on rubies, leprous and wine-dark stones. Born all in the dark wormy earth, cold specks of fire, evil light shining in the darkness, where fallen archangels flung the stars of their brows. Muddy swine snouts, hands root in root, gripe and rest them. She dances in the foul gloom where gum bums with garlic. A sailorman, rust-bearded, sips from a beaker rum and eyes her. A long and sea-fed silent rut. She dances, capers, wagging her sowest haunches and her hips on her gross belly flapping a ruby egg. Old Russell, with a smeared chamois rag burnished again his gem, turned it and held it at the point of his Moses beard. Grandfather ape, gloating on a stolen hoard. And you who wrest old images from the burial earth, the brain-sick words of sophist, Antiphanes, a lore of drugs, orient and immortal wheat standing from everlasting to everlasting. Two old women, fresh from their whiff of the briny, trudged through Irishton along London Bridge Road, one with a sanded-tired umbrella, one with a midwife's bag in which 11 cockles rolled. The whir of flapping leathern bands and hum of dynamos from the powerhouse urged Stephen to be on. Beingless things, stop. Throb always without you, and the throb always within. Your heart you sing of, I between them. Where? Between two roaring worlds where they swirl, I shatter them one and both, but stun myself too in the blow. Shatter me, you who can. Bawd and butcher were the words. I say, not yet a while. Look around. Yes, quite true. Very large and wonderful, and keeps famous time. You say right, sir. A Monday morning 'twas so indeed. Stephen went down Bedford Row, the handle of the ash clacking against his shoulder blade. In Clahissy's window, a faded 1860 print of Heenan boxing Sayers held his eye. Staring backers with square hats stood round the roped prize ring. The heavyweights in tight loincloths proposed gently each to other his boldest fists. And they are throbbing, heroes' hearts. He turned and halted by the slanted book cart. "Tuppence each," the huckster said. "4 for 6 pence." Tattered pages. The Irish Beekeeper, Life and Miracles of the Cure of Ars, Pocket Guide to Killarney. I might find here one of my pawned school prizes. Stefano Dedalo, Alumno Optimo, Palmam Ferente. Father Conmee, having read his little hours, walked through the hamlet of Donnycarney, murmuring vespers. Binding too good, probably. What is this? Ain't the 9th book of Moses? Secret of all secrets? Seal of King David? Thumbed pages, read and read. Who has passed here before me? How to soften chopped hands. Recipe for white wine vinegar. How to win a woman's love? For me, this. Say the following talisman 3 times with hands folded. Seel ilion abracada femininum. Amor mi solo. Sanctus. Amen. Who wrote this? Charms and invocations of the most blessed Peter. Solanka abbot, to all true believers divulged. As good as any other abbot's charms, as mumbling Joachim's. Down, baldy noddle, or we'll wool your wool. What are you doing here, Stephen? Dilly's high shoulders and shabby dress. Shut the book quick. Don't let's see. What are you doing? Stephen said. A Stuart face of none such Charles, lank locks falling at its sides. It glowed as she crouched feeding the fire with broken boots. I told her of Paris, late lie-a-bed under a quilt of old overcoats, fingering a pinchbeck bracelet, Dan Kelly's token. Nebracada femininum. What have you got there? Stephen asked. I bought it from the other cart for a penny, Dilly said, laughing nervously. Is it any good? My eyes, they say she has. Do others see me so? Quick, far and daring, shallow of my mind? He took the coverless book from her hand, Chardonnel's French primer. What'd you buy that for? He asked. To learn French? She nodded, reddening and closing tight her lips. Show no surprise. Quite natural. Here, Stephen said. It's all right. Mind Maggie doesn't pawn it on you. I suppose all my books are gone. Some, Dilly said. We had to. She is drowning. Agenbite. Save her. Agenbite, all against us. She will drown me with her eyes and hair. Lank coils of seaweed hair around me. My heart, my soul. Salt green death. We. Agenbite of Inwit. Inwit's Agenbite. Misery. Misery. Happy Bloomsday from the Rosenbach.
Hi, I'm Christopher Lindsay, and on behalf of the Rosenbach, I'm happy to be reading from James Joyce's Ulysses, Episode 10, The Wandering Rocks. William Humble, Earl of Dudley, and Lady Dudley, accompanied by Lieutenant Colonel Heseltine, drove out after luncheon from the Viceregal Lodge. In the following carriage were the Honorable Mrs. Paget, Miss de Courcy, and the Honorable Gerald Ward, ADC, in attendance. The cavalcade passed out by the lower gate of Phoenix Park, saluted by obsequious policemen, and proceeded past Kingsbridge along the northern quays. The Viceroy was most cordially greeted on his way through the metropolis. At Bloody Bridge, Mr. Thomas Kiernan, beyond the river, greeted him vainly from afar. Between Queen's and Whitworth bridges, Lord Dudley's viceregal carriages passed and were unsaluted by Mr. Dudley White, B.L., M.A., who stood on Erin Quay outside Mrs. Emmy White's the pawnbroker's at the corner of Erin Street West, stroking his nose with his forefinger, undecided whether he should arrive at Phibsborough more quickly by a triple change of tram or by hailing a car or on foot through Smithfield, Constitution Hill, and Broadstone Terminus. In the porch of Four Courts, Richie Goulding, with the cost bag of Goulding, Collis, and Ward, saw him with surprise. Past Richmond Bridge, at the doorstep of the office of Reuben J. Dodd, solicitor, agent for the Patriotic Insurance Company, an elderly female about to enter changed her plan and, retracing her steps by King's window, smiled credulously on the representative of His Majesty. From its sluice in wood quay wall under Tom Devon's office, Pottle River hung out in fealty, a tongue of liquid sewage. Above the cross blind of the Ormond Hotel, gold by bronze, Miss Kennedy's head by Miss Douce's head watched and admired. On Ormond Quay, Mr. Simon Dedalus, steering his way from the greenhouse for the sub-sheriff's office, stood still in mid-street. He brought his hat low. His Excellency graciously returned Mr. Dedalus's greeting. From Cahill's corner, the Reverend Hugh C. Love, M.A., made obeisance unperceived, mindful of lords deputies whose hands benignant had held of your rich advocens. On Grattan Bridge, Lenehan and McCoy, taking leave of each other, watched the carriages go by. Passing by Roger Green's office and Dollard's big red printing house, Gertie McDowell, carrying the Catesby's Cork lino letters for her father, who was laid up, knew by the style it was the Lord and Lady Lieutenant, but she couldn't see what Her Excellency had on because the tram and Spring's big yellow furniture van had to stop in front of her on account of it being the Lord Lieutenant. Beyond Lundy Foots, from the shaded door of Kavanagh's wine rooms, John Weiss Nolan smiled with unseen coldness towards the Lord Lieutenant General and General Governor of Ireland. The Right Honourable William Humble, Earl of Dudley, GCVO, passed Mickey Anderson's all-times ticking watches and Henry James' wax, smart-suited, fresh-cheeked models. The gentleman Henry Dernier Cri James, over against Dame Gate, Tom Rochford and Nosy Flynn watched the approach of the cavalcade. Tom Rochford, seeing the eyes of Lady Dudley fixed on him, took his thumbs quickly out of the pockets of his claret waistcoat and doffed his cap to her. A charming soubrette, great Marie Kendall with dowby cheeks and lifted skirt, smiled daubily from her poster upon William Humble, Earl of Dudley, and upon Lieutenant Colonel H.G. Heseltine, and also upon the Honourable Gerald Ward, A.D.C., from the window of the DBC. Buck Mulligan gaily and Haynes gravely gazed down on the viceregal equipage over the shoulders of eager guests, whose massive forms darkened the chessboard whereon John Howard Parnell looked intently. In Fowne Street, Dilly Dedalus, straining her sight upward from Chardonnel's first French primer, saw sunshine span and wheel spokes spinning in the glare. John Henry Menton, filling the doorway of commercial buildings, stared from wine-big oyster eyes, holding a fat gold hunter watch, not looked at, in his fat left hand, not feeling it. Where the foreleg of King's Billy's horse pawed the air, Mrs. Breen plucked her hastening husband back from under the hooves of the outriders. She shouted in his ear the tidings. Understanding, he shifted his tomes to his left breast and saluted the second carriage. The Honourable Gerald Ward, A.D.C., agreeably surprised, made haste to reply. At Ponsonby's corner, a jaded white flagon H halted, and 4 tall hatted white flagons halted behind him. E-L-Y''S, while outriders pranced past in carriages. Opposite Pigot's music warerooms, Mr. Dennis J. McGinney, professor of dancing and etc., gaily apparelled, gravely walked, outpassed by a viceroy, and unobserved. By the provost wall came jauntily Blazes Boylan, stepping in tan shoes and socks, with sky blue clocks to the refrain of "My Girl's a Yorkshire Girl." Blazes Boylan presented to the leaders sky blue frontlets and a high action, a sky blue tie, a wide-brimmed straw hat at a rakish angle, and a suit of indigo serge. His hands in his jacket pockets forgot to salute, but he offered to the 3 ladies the bold admiration of his eyes and the red flower between his lips. As he drove along Nassau Street, His Excellency drew the attention of his bowing consort to the program of music which was being discoursed in College Park. Unseen brazen Highland laddies blared and drum-thumped after the cortege. But though she's a factory lass and wears no fancy clothes, bada-boom, yet I've a sort of a Yorkshire relish for my little Yorkshire rose, bada-boom. Thither of the wall, the quarter-mile flat handicaptors, M.C. Green, H. Shrift, T.M. Patey, C. Scaife, J.B. Jeffs, G. N. Morphy, F. Stevenson, C. Adderley, and W.C. Huggard started in pursuit. Striding past Finn's Hotel, Cashel, Boyle, O'Connor, Fitzmaurice, Tisdale, Farrell stared through a fierce eyeglass across the carriages at the head of Mr. M. E. Solomons in the window of the Austro-Hungarian vice-consulate. Deep in Leinster Street, by Trinity's postern, a loyal Kingsman hornblower touched his tally-ho cap. As the glossy horses pranced by Marion Square, Master Patrick Aloysius Dingnam waiting saw salutes being given to the gent with the topper, and raised also his new black cap with fingers greased by pork steak paper. His collar too sprang up. The Viceroy, on his way to inaugurate the Mirus Bazaar in aid of funds for Mercer's Hospital, drove with his following towards Lower Mount Street. He passed the blind stripling opposite Broadbent's. In Lower Mount Street, a pedestrian in a brown mackintosh, eating dry bread, passed swiftly and unscathed across the Viceroy's path. At the Royal Canal Bridge, from his hoarding, Mr. Eugene Stratton, his blub lips a grin, bade all comers welcome to Pembroke Township. At Haddington Road corner, 2 sandy women halted themselves, an umbrella and a bag in which 11 cockles rolled, to view with wonder the Lord Mayor and Lady Mayoress without his golden chain. On Northumberland and Lansdowne roads, His Excellency acknowledged punctually salutes from rare male walkers. The salute of 2 small schoolboys at the garden gate of the house, said to have been admired by the late Queen when visiting the Irish capital with her husband, the Prince Consort, in 1849, and the salute of Almidano Artifoni's sturdy trousers, swallowed by a closing door. On behalf of everyone at the Rosenbach, have a happy Bloomsday.
Happy Bloomsday from the James Joyce Centre in Dublin. My name is Deirdre Gallagher and I'm director of this wonderful centre, right in the heart of the Hibernian metropolis. James Joyce once said that if you get to the heart of Dublin, you could get to the heart of the world. And this Bloomsday, we hope that Dublin is indeed in everybody's hearts. Happy Bloomsday, everyone. Mr. Leopold Bloom ate with relish the inner organs of beasts and fowls. He liked thick giblet soup, nutty gizzards, a stuffed roast heart, liver slices fried with crust crumbs, fried hen cods roes. Most of all, he liked grilled mutton kidneys, which gave to his palate a fine tang of faintly scented urine. Kidneys were in his mind as he moved about the kitchen softly, writing her breakfast things on the humpy tray. Gelid light and air were in the kitchen, but out of doors, gentle summer morning everywhere made him feel a bit peckish. The coals were reddening. Another slice of bread and butter, 3, 4, right. She didn't like her plate full, right. He turned from the tray, lifted the kettle off the hob, and set it sideways on the fire. It sat there, dull and squat, its spout stuck out. Cup of tea soon. Good. Mouth dry. The cat walked stiffly round a leg of the table with the tail on high. Meow! Oh, there you are, Mr. Bloom said, turning from the fire. The cat mewed in answer and stalked again stiffly round the leg of the table, mewing. Just how she stalks over my writing table. Purr, scratch my head, purr. Mr. Bloom watched cautiously, kindly, the lithe black form. Clean to see, the gloss of her sleek hide, the white button under the butt of her tail, the green flashing eyes. But he bent down to her, his hands on his knees. Milk for the pussins, he said. Meow, the cat cried.
Hi there, I'm Damon Bonetti, and I'll be reading episode 11, Sirens. Bronze by gold, Miss Douce's head by Miss Kennedy said. Over the cross blind of the Ormond bar, heard the vice-regal hooves go by, ringing steel. Is that her? Asked Miss Kennedy. Miss Douce said yes, sitting with his ex, pearl grey and eau de Nys. Exquisite contrast, Miss Kennedy said. When all agog, Miss Douce said eagerly, Look at the fellow in the tall silk. Who? Where? Gold asked more eagerly. In the second carriage, Miss Douce's wet lips said, laughing in the sun. He's looking. Mind till I see. She darted, bronze, to the backmost corner, flattening her face against the pane in a halo of harried breath. Her wet lips tittered. He's killed looking back. She laughed. Oh, wept. Aren't men frightful idiots? With sadness. Miss Kennedy sauntered sadly from the bright light, twining a loose hair behind an ear, sauntering sadly. Gold no more, she twined a hair. Sadly, she twined in sauntering gold hair behind a curving ear. It's them has the fine times, sadly, then she said. A man. Blue went by Moulang's pipes, bearing in his breast the sweets of sin, by wine's antiques, in memory, bearing sweet sinful words, by Carol's dusky battered plate for Raoul. The boots to them in the bar, them barmaids came, For them unheeding him, he banged on the counter his tray of chattering china, and, "There's your teas," he said. Miss Kennedy, with manners transposed the tea tray down to an upturned lithia crate, safe from eyes, low. "What is it?" Loud Boots unmannerly asked. "Find out," Miss Douce retorted, leaving her spying point. "Your beau, is it?" A haughty Bronze replied. "I'll complain to Mrs. Demassy on you if I hear any more of your impertinent insolence." "Impertinent," Boots' snout sniffed rudely, as he retreated as she threatened as he had come. Bloom. On her flower-frowning Miss Douce said, "Most aggravating, that young brat is. If he doesn't conduct himself, I'll wring his ear for him a yard long." Ladylike, in exquisite contrast. "Take no notice," Miss Kennedy rejoined. She poured in a teacup tea, then back in the teapot tea. They cowered under the reef of counter, waiting on footstools, crates upturned, waiting for their teas to draw. They pawed their blouses, both of black satin, 2 and 9 a yard, waiting for their teas to draw, and 2 and 7. Yes, bronze from anear, by gold from afar, heard steel from anear, hooves ring from afar, and heard steel hooves ring hoof, ring steel. "Am I awfully sunburnt?" Miss Bronze unbloused her neck. "No," said Miss Kennedy. "It gets brown after." "Did you try the borax with the cherry laurel water?" Miss Douce half stood to see her skin askance in the bar mirror, gilded lettered, where hock and claret glasses shimmered, and in their midst a shell. "And leave it to my hands," she said. "Try it with the glycerin," Miss Kennedy advised. Bidding her neck and hands adieu, Miss Douce. "Those things only bring out a rash," replied, receded. "I asked that old fogey in Boyd's for something for my skin." Miss Kennedy, pouring now a full-drawn tea, grimaced and prayed, "Oh, don't remind me of him for mercy's sake." "But wait till I tell you," Miss Douce entreated. Sweet tea, Miss Kennedy having poured with milk plugged both 2 ears with little fingers. "No, don't," she cried. "I won't listen," she cried. "But Bloom?" Miss Douce grunted in snuffy fogey's tone. "For your what?" says he. Miss Kennedy unplugged her ears to hear, to speak, but said, but prayed again. "Don't let me think of him or I'll expire, the hideous old wretch." That night, in the Antient concert rooms, she sipped distastefully her brew, hot tea, a sipped sweet tea. Here he was, Miss Douce said, cocking her bronze head 3/4, ruffling her nose wings, huffa huffa. Shrill shriek of laughter sprang from Miss Kennedy's throat. Miss Douce huffed and snorted down her nostrils that quivered impertinent like a snout in quest. "Oh!" shrieking Miss Kennedy cried, "will you ever forget his goggle eye?" Miss Douce chimed in deep bronze laughter, shouting, "And your other eye." Blue Who's dark eye read Aaron Figgeter's name. Why do I always think fig gathering figs, I think. And Prosper Laurie's Huguenot name by Bassie's Blessed Virgins. Bloom's dark eyes went by, blue-robed, white under, come to me. God, they believe she is, or goddess. Those today I could not see. That fellow spoke, a student, after with Dedalus' son. He might be Mulligan, all comely virgins, that brings those rakes of fellows in, her white. By when his eyes, the sweets of sin, sweet are the sweets of sin. In a giggling peal, young gold bronze voices blended. Deuce with Kennedy, your other eye. They threw young heads back, bronze giggle gold, to let free fly their laughter, screaming your other, signals to each other, high piercing notes. Ah, panting, sighing, ah, fordone, their mirth died down. Miss Kennedy lipped her cup again, raised, drank a sip, and giggled. Miss Douce, bending over the tea tray, ruffled again her nose, and rolled droll fattened eyes. Again Kenny giggles, stooping, her fair pinnacles of hair stooping. Her tortoise nape comb showed, spluttered out of her mouth her tea, choking in tea and laughter, coughing with choking, crying, "Oh, Gracie eyes! Imagine being married to a man like that," she cried, with his bit of beard. Deuce gave full vent to a splendid yell, a full woman, delight, joy, indignation. "Married to the Gracie nose," she yelled. Shrill with deep laughter, after gold, after bronze, they urged each to peal after peal, ringing in changes, bronze gold, gold bronze, shrill deep to laughter after laughter, and then laughed more. Gracie-eyed nose, exhausted, breathless, their shaken heads they laid braided and pinnacled by glossy combed against the counter ledge, all flushed, panting, sweating, breathless, married to Bloom, to Gracie Bloom. "Oh, saints above," Miss Douce said, sighed above her jumping rose. "I wish I hadn't laughed so much. I feel all wet." "Oh, Miss Douce," Miss Kennedy protested, "you horrid thing," and flushed yet more. "You horrid." More goldenly. Happy Bloomsday from the Rosenbach.
Hello, my name is Lisa Washington, and I serve on the board of directors of the Rosenbach. I first got to know the Rosenbach through Bloomsday, as I had never been able to finish Ulysses on my own, so I thought I would at least listen to it. And then I decided to sign up for the Ulysses course with the inimitable Paul Saint-Amour, and I've been hooked ever since. I love the variety of the classes that the Rosenbach offers, as well as the events. I've learned a great deal from the incredible teachers, as well as from my classmates, and I've made some really incredible, dear friends through the courses and the events. The Rosenbach is such a special place, filled with incredible books, passionate staff, and curious visitors. I'm so grateful to be able to have the opportunity to take advantage of all that it has to offer, and I hope that you will too. Happy Bloomsday from the Rosenbach.
Alessandra Occhiolini, and I'll be reading to you today from Sirens. And if you have the Gabriel edition, this will begin on line 185 of Sirens, and it will be on page 214 of your book. And so as we begin in the spirit of the chapter, by Cantwell's offices roved Greasebloom, by Seppi's virgins, bright of their oils. Nanetti's father hawked those things about, wheedling at the doors as I. Religion pays. Must see him for that par. Eat first, I want. Not yet. At 4, she said. Time ever passing, clock hands turning on. Where to eat? The Clarence, the Dolphin. On. For Raoul, eat. If I got 5 guineas with these ads. The violet silk petticoats. Not yet. The sweets of sin. Flushed less, still less, goldenly paled. Into their bars strolled Mr. Dedalus. Chips picking chips off one of his rocky thumbnails. Chips he strolled. Oh, welcome back, Miss Deuce. He held her hand. Enjoyed her holidays? Tip-top. He hoped that she had had nice weather in Rostraver. Gorgeous, she said. Look at the holy show I am, lying out on the strand all day. Bronze whiteness. That was exceedingly naughty of you, Mr. Dedalus told her and pressed her hand indulgently. Tempting poor, simple males. Miss Deuce of Satin deuced her arm away. Oh, go away, she said. You're very simple, I don't think. He was. Well, now I am, he mused. I look so simple in the cradle, they christened me Simple Simon. You must have been a doty, Miss Deuce made answer. And what did the doctor order today? Well, now, he mused, whatever you say yourself. I think I'll trouble you for some fresh water and half a glass of whiskey. Jingle. With the greatest alacrity, Miss Deuce agreed. With the grace of alacrity towards the mirror-gilt Cantrell and Cochrane's she turned herself. With grace she tapped a measure of gold whiskey from her crystal keg. Forth from the skirt of his coat, Mr. Dedalus brought pouch and pipe. Alacrity she served, he blew through the 2 flew husky fife notes. By Jove, he mused, I often wanted to see the Mourne Mountains. Must be a great tonic in the air down there, but a long threatening comes at last, they say. Yes, yes, yes. He fingered shreds of hair, her maiden hair, her mermaids, into the bowl. Chips, shreds, musings, mute. None not said nothing, yes. Gaily Miss Deuce polished a tumbler, trilling, Oh, why Dolores, queen of the eastern seas. Was Mr. Lidwell in today? In came Lenehan, round him peered Lenehan. Mr. Bloom reached Essex Bridge. Yes, Mr. Bloom crossed Bridge of Yessex. To Martha I must write, by paper, dailies. Girl, they're civil. Bloom, old Bloom. Blue Bloom is on the rye. He was in at lunchtime, Miss Deuce said. Lenehan came forward. Was Mr. Boylan looking for me? He asked. She answered. Miss Kennedy, was Mr. Boylan in while I was upstairs? She asked. Miss Voice of Kennedy answered, a second teacup poised, her gaze upon a page. No, he was not. Miss Gaze of Kennedy, heard, not seen, read on. Lenehan round the sandwich bell wound, his round body round. Peep, who's in the corner? No glance of Kennedy rewarding him, yet he made overtures. To mind her stops, to read only the black ones, round O and crooked S. Jingle, jaunty jingle. Girl gold she read and did not glance, take no notice. She took no notice, while he read by rote a sulpha fable for her, plampering flatly. A fox met a stork, said the fox to the stork, will you put your bill down in my trough and pull up a bone? He droned in vain. Miss Deuce turned her tea aside. He sighed aside. Ah me, oh my. He greeted Mr. Dedalus and got a nod. Greetings from the famous son of a famous father. Who may he be? Mr. Dedalus answered. Lenehan opened most genial arms. Who? Who may it be? He asked. Can you ask? Stephen, the youthful bard. Dry. Mr. Dedalus' famous father laid by his dry-filled pipe. I see, he said. I didn't recognize him for the moment. I hear he is keeping very select company. Have you seen him lately? He had. I quaffed the nectar bowl with him this very day, said Lenehan. In Mooney's Unville and in Mooney's Sur Mer, he had received the rhino for the labor of his muse. He smiled at bronze tea-bathed lips, at listing lips and eyes. The elite of Erin hung upon his lips, the ponderous pundit Hugh McHugh, Dublin's most brilliant scribe and editor, and that minstrel boy of the wild wet west, who is known by the euphonious appellation of the O'Madden Burke. After an interval, Mr. Dedalus raised his grog, and that must have been highly diverting, said he. I see. He drank, with faraway morning mountain eye, set down his glass. He looked towards the salon door. I see you have moved the piano. The tuner was in today, Miss Deuce replied, tuning it for the smoking concert, and I never heard such an exquisite player. Is that a fact? Didn't he, Miss Kennedy? The real classical, you know. And blind too, poor fellow. Not 20, I'm sure he was. Is that a fact? Mr. Dedalus said. He drank and strayed away. So sad to look upon his face, Miss Deuce condoled. God's curse on a bitch's bastard. Happy Bloomsday from the Rosenbach.
Hi, I'm Valerie Ye, and I will be reading from Chapter 11, Sirens. Now, I wish you could hear the voices in my head that I hear when I read this passage, but sadly, I am unable to reproduce a good Irish accent. Okay, I'm unable to reproduce an Irish accent at all, so please use your imagination. Okay, here we go. Blazes Boylan's smart tan shoes creaked on the bar floor where he strode. Yes, gold from anear, by bronze from afar. Lenehan heard and knew and hailed him. See, the conquering hero comes. Between the car and window, warily walking, went Bloom, unconquered hero. See me he might, the seat he sat on, warm. Black weary he-cat walked towards Richie Goulding's legal bag, lifted aloft, saluting. And I from thee. I heard you were around, said Blazes Boylan. He touched to fair Miss Kennedy a rim of his slanted straw. She smiled on him, but Sister Bronze outsmiled her, preening for him her richer hair, a bosom and a rose. Smart Boylan bespoke potions. What's your cry? Glass of bitter? Glass of bitter, please, and a slow gin for me. Wiring yet? Not yet. At 4, she. Who said 4? Cowley's red lugs and bulging apple in the door of the sheriff's office. Avoid. Holding a chance. What is he doing in the Ormond? Car waiting. Wait. Hello, we're off to. Something to eat? I will too was just in here. What, Ormond? Best value in Dublin. Is that so? Dining room. Sit tight there. See, not be seen. I think I'll join you. Come on. Richie led on. Bloom followed bag. Dinner fit for a prince. Miss Deuce reached high to take a flagon, stretching her satin arm, her bust all that but burst so high. Oh, jerked Lenehan, gasping with each stretch. Oh! But easily she seized her prey and let it low in triumph. Why don't you grow? Asked Blazes Boylan. She Bronze, dealing from her oblique jar thick syrupy liquor for his lips, looked as it flowed. Flour in his coat? Who gave him? And syruped with her voice, fine goods in small parcels. That is to say, she. Neatly she poured slow, syrupy slow. Here's fortune, Blazes said. He pitched a broad coin down. Coin rang. Hold on, said Lenehan, till I... Fortune, he wished, lifting his bubbled ale. Scepter will win in a canter, he said. I plunge a bit, said Boylan, winking and drinking. Not on my own, you know. Fancy a friend of mine. Lenehan still drank and grinned at his tilted ale and at Miss Douce's lips that all but hummed, not shut, the ocean song her lips had trilled. Ay Dolores, the Eastern Seas. Happy Bloomsday from the Rosenbach.
Bloomsday 2020 is made possible through a generous grant from the Consulate General of Ireland's Immigrant Support Program. This project is also supported through the Pennsylvania Humanities Council, the federal state partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Special thanks to Lenny Steiner and Perry Lerner, and to the South Jersey Celtic Society. Thank you so much for supporting Bloomsday 2020.